Let's bring in Dan Perry, managing partner at consulting and public relations firm Thunder 11 and the author of Ask Questions Later. Dan spent close to a decade covering the Israel-Palestinian conflict for the Associated Press. Dan, we know that you're an expert in this region, and I have to believe that what you're seeing right now is troubling even for you when you know what's happening. But the fact that they're not able to celebrate has to also weigh on your heart.
Well, it's obviously sad to see. The Bethlehem celebrations over the years have been a big part of global celebration of Christmas. The midnight mass at the Church of the Nativity is a big thing seen all over the world. Many tourists used to flock to Manger Square. Israelis also. Bethlehem was the most Christian of Palestinian towns in the West Bank over the years. Now, the Christians have lost their majority there. It has to be said, the Palestinian Christians were always a minority among all Palestinians, but that minority has dwindled to a very small number in recent years, both because of a feeling of being unwelcome by Palestinian Muslims, and also just the Christians were perhaps more able to leave. And so mainly they live in Europe and the United States now. Yeah, it's sad to see, but it reflects the fact that in the West Bank, there is a lot of sympathy for their fellow Palestinians in Gaza and what they're enduring as a result of the war that was, of course, sparked by Palestinian Islamic fundamentalists carrying out a massacre in Israel on October 7th.
And Dan, it seems as though Hamas has been really effective at their messaging to paint themselves as also a victim. And this war is often painted as a battle between Jewish Israeli soldiers and Islamist terrorists in Gaza. How are the Palestinian and Israeli Christian communities being impacted by the fighting and the messaging?
Well, the Christians among the Palestinians were always a little bit suspect, as being a little bit less Palestinian in the eyes of their fellow Palestinians. They're in the middle for sure. In Israel, there's a larger Christian Palestinian community, Christian Israeli Arab community focused on a town of Nazareth up north. They tend to be reasonably loyal citizens of Israel. Remember, Israel, a country of 10 million people, has 2 million Israeli Arabs / Palestinians. Of them, maybe up to 100,000 or maybe even more are Palestinian Christian Arab Israelis. So they really are sort of a bridge community. And I think by and large, they want to be messengers of peace. And in fact, I know that there is sort of a peace convention in Nazareth next week that I'm going to be at. Where Israeli Jews and outsiders and Christians and Muslims are all coming together to sort of issue a voice of peace. And I think that reflects the position of the Christian Israeli Arab Palestinians.
Dan, I have another question I have to ask you before I run out of time. Egypt has reportedly put a new deal on the table that would see Hamas release 40 Israeli hostages in exchange for a 2-week ceasefire and the release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. Is that a deal the Israeli government would actually consider?
Depends. It really does depend. The deal has even bigger ambitions than that. The deal wants to bring about an end of the war and the establishment, after the initial 2-week period referenced, of a joint Hamas-Palestinian Authority, Fatah government of more moderate people. But it depends on whether Israel thinks it really can ultimately achieve its original goal, which is fully eradicating Hamas. There is a beginning of a discourse in Israel now that maybe was overambitious. Maybe Hamas has been punished enough in a way. Maybe a better way out would be to prioritize the issue of the hostages. And there's a lot of sentiment in Israel that the hostages should be the main thing more than the absolute demolition of Hamas. So potentially, they may not be ready for it quite yet, but potentially some version of the Egyptian plan might be a face-saving, elegant, optimal way out for everyone. And I would add, it reflects the positive role that Egypt continues to try to play in the Middle East. And that is, on this Christmas Day, a version of good news.
And in the middle of all that, Dan, so many Palestinians who are just really suffering under that continuing assault as Israel works to root out Hamas. Dan Perry, thank you so much for joining us this morning.